Hi everyone, Professor King here. In this video, I'm going to be discussing Tolentino's chapter entitled Ecstasy from Trick Mirror. So buckle your seatbelts, we're gonna dive right in. I'm gonna bring it to the share screen. This is gonna be a relatively short video. I hope you enjoyed the chapter. I think it does a great job of weaving rhetoric with discussions of religion and rap music and drug use and all these sorts of things, right? All these contemporary phenomena, but it does so in a way that we can look at, we can view it from a lot of the lenses we've been viewing these issues from. So like I said, I hope you're enjoying these readings. So I'm going to bring it to a share screen really quickly, and then we'll just jump right on to the notes that I have. And really, I just have a couple questions for Tolentino. Nothing crazy, but these are questions you should be considering, after you highlight and annotate, box unfamiliar words and define them and reread them in context, notes in the margins, all the stuff you should be doing as you actively read, but before we get to the discussion board, right? So the questions I have, and maybe I'll bullet point these to just kind of make them, or I'll number them, that'll help. Yeah, I like that. I'm a weirdo. All right. So the first question I have is, what's the connection Tolentino makes in this chapter between drugs, music, religion/spirituality? She talks about mysticism, so I don't want to just say religion, and identity, right? We keep talking about identity because identity is such an integral part to the arguments we present, especially as, again, we're segueing from looking at the self, the individual in society, to how the individual relates with others, right? In these sort of small group interpersonal settings. So think about how all of those things are connected, right? Drugs, music, religion, and spirituality, and identity. Then consider the subject matter she researches, right? Like DJ Screw or the mega churches, Houston, the city itself, the zoning laws, like all these, Sappho, right? There's all these kind of really cool things in this chapter. And go to her bibliography of sources in the book. Again, you might have a different cover. It's the same dang book. In my book, it's on page 300. So if we go to page 300, again, you have, for every single chapter, and I'm going to make it extreme close up here. For every single chapter, you have that bibliography of sources, which is super cool when you're, researching and working on that, because that's even more research you can do to contextualize the things she's talking about. So how does she present evidence in, when she presents these sources? How does she do it? And what does she do with those sources? How does she analyze them? What claims does she put around them? How does she relate it back to her overall thesis, right? Like, don't just think about what's on the page, think about how it was put there and why. Because we're going beyond now just seeing writing, we're going beyond just reading for plot or story, right? We have to think about how the text is crafted, how the art happened. So keep that in mind. My third question is, she discusses empathy, the notion of empathy, and I'm gonna make that bold because I can't stress enough how important this is. This notion of empathy, and she talks about it in depth in this chapter, not just in terms of how she was influenced by religion, by drug use, by music, right, for this empathetic experience. But then she starts to talk about it, at least insinuate its relationship to critical thought, right? So your job, what your job is as the reader is I want you to make that connection based on what you've read from Tolentino, is what connection can you make between empathy as she describes it and critical thought? What about empathy has to do with critical thought? And use some of the, think about some of the examples she used and the stories she tells to get there. And then finally, how might this narrative from this chapter reflect notions of Rogerian arguments, of invitational arguments, and of the Toulmin model, right? So look back on those chapter 7 notes from Everything's an Argument and see right? Like if there are elements of any of those structures of argument in here. You know, if we think again about how we're segueing from the individual to the individual and others, right? We're starting to see patterns. We're starting to see patterns in this chapter. We're starting to see relationships between perhaps this narrative, Baldwin's narrative, Solnit's narrative, right? We're starting to see like these people are telling their personal stories and their personal interactions with various people or groups, and then they're sort of seeing how that dictates their understanding of the world and what that means, right? So again, it's not a bad idea to maybe make one of those Venn diagrams, one of those little triangle diagrams like we did the other day, and think about the place that we, you know, the space that we inhabit in the world, and also how we affect the world and how the world affects us, right? That's sort of like a conversation of affect, right? If I put these arguments out into the world, if I exist in this world, but yet things are also happening constantly that I'm absorbing and responding to, what do you make of that? So, you know, start to think about these things really critically, right? Don't just summarize, don't just say like, oh, I don't know, right? Really think about these things critically and why they might be important. But that's really all I have. I'm going to take it off share screen now. That's really all I have in terms of, you know, what to look for in this chapter. But this will definitely help you to generate ideas for the discussion board that will be posted on Canvas soon. So I hope you all have a wonderful day. And I will see you soon in cyberspace. All right, bye.